Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. It's just about 11 a.m. here in the UK, so we're going to go ahead and kick off. Today is part of our Pearson English Assessment Summer Sessions. Every Tuesday throughout the summer, we've been looking at different aspects of English language assessment and how it can be used to support and drive success at each stage of the learning journey. Today, we'll take a look at the Teacher Preparation Pathway, a handy tool that has all the resources you need in one place to prepare your learners for the PTE Academic test. And our presenter is Melanie Drake. Melanie manages the teacher training and engagement strategy of Pearson's portfolio of English language assessments. With experience as both a teacher and trainer, she has expertise in assessment methodology and course design, ESOL examinations, and qualification development. In this session, she'll focus on our new teacher community and all the support coming this year, and she'll show you the best way to help your students prepare for the test with our range of preparation resources. Just some quick housekeeping things before we get started. There'll be time for Melanie to answer questions at the end, so please feel free to submit those in the question box at any time during the talk, and we'll pick them up towards the last 15 to 20 minutes or so of the hour. The webinar will be recorded and available shortly afterwards on our website in case you want to rewatch it or share it with colleagues. And you'll also receive a certificate of attendance via email at the end of the session. So now I'm happy to pass this one over to Melanie to kick us off.
Thank you very much, Rochelle. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. If you can just let me know that everything looks tickety-boo. So yeah, my computer's just warming up a bit.
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay,
we can
Rochelle,
see it.
is this looking okay?
Yeah, it looks fantastic.
And everyone can hear me and see me?
I believe that is a yes.
Fantastic. Okay, without further ado then, let's kick off. So as Rochelle said, my name is Melanie Drake and I am the Teaching and Resources Manager across the English assessment portfolio, and I'm really happy to be here with you all today. I know this is a fantastic opportunity when there's so many of us together here all in one space, and I thank you for taking the time out of your day, whatever your day looks like today, or your afternoon or your evening, to be here and go through this session with us. And I hope it's just the start of many more sessions to come. So while I can't be with you in person today, let's try to feel as connected as we can be. And I'll start by telling you a little bit more about myself before we get into the meat of the session. So I'm a passionate educator, and I'm really interested in effective teaching practices and supporting you to be as confident in the classroom as you can be, whilst enjoying yourselves in the process. This is obviously the key, that we have fun and we enjoy what we're doing. As a previous teacher and trainer, I've taught, trained and volunteered worldwide. And over the last, I'd say that I've been with Pearson now over 4.5 years. I've dedicated my time to teachers globally, supporting your practices in the classroom. So it's fantastic now to have moved into the assessment space and to be looking at PTE Academic and everything that we can do to support you with test preparation. I just want to shine a little bit of light as well on COVID-19. I think it seems appropriate to do so. I hope ultimately that you're all taking care of yourselves and each other and your communities, whatever the sort of lesser extent of the lockdown might be for you now. And ultimately, I hope we can start to see some of the opportunities that are creeping up for us in assessment and virtual learning. Now that there's quite a few changes happening. Obviously, we don't know exactly what these changes are going to look like for as long time, but we do know that there will be some changes. And ultimately, I hope that we can feel more positive and excited about what our classroom practices might look like in the future, even if they might be somewhat different. Okay. So today's session, what are we going to be talking about? So I've split it into 4 key areas. And the first part actually that I want to focus on is the PTE Academic teacher community, which is something that we're still in the first phases of scoping out. I want to put a bit more attention on us as a teaching group, perhaps slightly separate from the test takers, in order to give ourselves the recognition that we deserve for the great work that we do. I think in terms of talking about our role as educators, certainly for me, in my experience, when I was a teacher, I worked at various different preparation schools, and you might have had similar experiences where you have, you know, even currently or previously, you have taught lots of different types of classes at the same time. So where your learners are of different age groups, different needs, maybe it's general English classes, young learner classes, very young learner classes, or, you know, test prep classes or EAP classes. I definitely had a real mix. And while that seemed quite sort of frantic at the time, I think that sort of mix of different classes was really useful for me, and it also helped me to understand that I particularly liked test preparation classes. That became my area of real interest. Certainly for me, I liked the structure that test preparation gave to my lessons. I found it quite motivating and also very gratifying when I could help learners get the scores they needed. In my personal experience, I found test prep classes were a very useful tool to assess my own teaching practice and highlight my strengths and my weaknesses that for me, I sometimes felt I couldn't generally get from a let's say a more general English class, for example. I'm not saying this will be everyone's experience, but it certainly was for me. The main heart of the session will be looking at the preparation pathway. This is a document we've put together which essentially culminates all of the teaching preparation resources and puts them in one handy place for you, so it will save you time and you don't have to navigate your way around the website to find what you need. We'll also be looking at a plan of action, some advice and some tips and pointers that will be helping you to be most effective when your time is short. Our time is always short, and regardless of what your situation is, what your circumstances is, and if you're working from home, if you are currently teaching a prep course, if you have a group of learners or one-to-ones, I think there's something that you can all take away from this, hopefully. And then the last part will be focusing on the brand new teacher-focused prep materials towards the end of the session, so please do stay tuned. This is a material that we have yet to speak about yet. This is the first time that we've spoke about it, and I'm really excited to find out what you think of it. So yeah, some great stuff coming at the end of the session. But ultimately, I also want you to come away from this session hopefully feeling excited and motivated about your role in the classroom and everything that we have coming to support you. So the first part then, a very quick poll. No fun lesson or session starts without a bit of getting to know each other, right? It takes me back to my time in the classroom. So I would love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. You may have put something in the chat. I wasn't able to see those. So we're going to put together a quick poll. I'm sorry I only had 5 options, so I hope that this will cover you more or less. Rochelle, are you going to put up a poll now so we can feed into that? Where in the world are you tuning in from? We've got North America or Caribbean, Central or South America, Europe or Africa, Asia or Middle East, and finally Australia.
Hi everyone, I've launched the poll. I think we've got 32% voted. We'll keep it open for another 30 seconds, but all looks good so far. And Mel, just a quick note, I think we're able to see your notes. So I'll give you a second here if you want to change that.
Oh. Yeah, let's definitely take those away.
GoToWebinar has many mysteries behind it, I think, and that is one of them today. But everyone keep voting.
I'm not actually entirely sure how I can get rid of that. Give me a second.
Yeah, sure thing.
You might have to help me out here because it didn't tell me that they're there or they're not there. It just seems to do it.
Yeah, it does seem to be one of those things. We've got almost 50% voted, so everyone, if you want to get your vote in these last 10 seconds, and then we'll also sort out the GoToWebinar setting here. So please bear with us. Thank you. I am going to close the poll here. And we're closing the poll, final votes, and we're in. So the results Mel, does this surprise you at all? Looks like we've got.
Can you read them out to me? Because I can't.
Yeah, so it looks like we've got only 2% dialing in from North America or the Caribbean, so it's quite early there. Central or South America, we've got 12% of our guests today, 30% coming in from Europe or Africa, and not surprisingly, we've got a really great attendance from Asia and the Middle East, and a little bit in Australia. So thanks again to everyone who dialed in today.
Fantastic. That's really good to know, and I'm sure I probably have a few stories from and interesting classes from your places, but that's probably a whole nother one. Okay, if we move on to the next slide, Rochelle, I want to make sure that you're not having to look at my notes and we can take them away entirely. Are you still seeing these?
I think if you want to make display settings a bit bigger or maximize that, because I think we would be able to swap presenter view and slideshow.
There we go.
There we are. Brilliant.
Perfect.
All sorted.
Okay. All right. And then at the next part then, I also would like to know, what experience do you have of teaching PTE Academic? Now, this is very much a session for everyone. I know that we're going to have, or I presume we might have a little bit of a mixed bag here. Whether you actually don't know anything about PTE Academic currently or high stakes assessment, or whether you're at the other end of the spectrum and actually you have been preparing learners for this test for some time, there should be something you can take away from this session regardless. But I would love to know what the sort of spread of experiences across the group today. So that's going to be our second poll.
Great. I've just launched this one. So everyone, if you can just spend a second here voting. We've got about a third of participants voting. So we'll leave this open for another 40 seconds or so.
Fantastic.
Okay, great. We've got about 50% of attendees having voted. We'll leave it open for another 15 seconds or so here. So cast your vote, please. I think these results might surprise you too, Mel. I'll be curious to hear what you think. Yeah, I think so. All right, we're going to go ahead and close this one. Thanks everyone who voted. All right, Mel, let's see what you think about this.
Yep. Do you want to read them out for me, if you may? Because I don't have visibility.
So completely new to this test, we've got more than 50% of our attendees having said they're brand new to PTE. I know a bit about this test, 37%, and 10% of our guests have said they have experience preparing learners for this test. Does that surprise you at all?
No, I think it's very difficult to predict. I mean, every time we speak to teachers, we have a slightly different spread of results. So today, if we're looking at just over more than half of people that are completely new, that's fantastic. And it's also good to see that we have a bit of a mixed bag as well. So great, thank you.
Great.
Okay. So let's start getting into a bit more of the meat of the session. We're going to talk about starting up a teacher community here, so being a part of something bigger. And let me talk to you a little bit about why I think this matters to me, and when I was thinking about what I wanted to build in terms of teaching support, whether this is training or products, or as well as engagement and interaction, a teacher community is really something that is at the forefront of my mind at the moment. I think it's important for a number of different reasons. The first one is that I think a community is a real sort of crucial knowledge domain for us, beyond the walls of the classroom. It's a space where we can all share our challenges, our successes, our best practices, and really have an open forum where we can connect and talk about what's happening in the classroom and what reflect and learn from each other. I think also at the moment we're in an era of quite rapid change in education, which is something that we should feel motivated and excited about. But when we're looking at being innovators or being more innovative, let's say, in terms of curriculum design, or ultimately having to pivot quite quickly in order to deal with the changes of more remote learning, it's also very helpful to stay connected, so that we're not trying to navigate this quite tricky change in isolation, but that we are supporting each other in doing so. I think a teacher community will give us a real synergy between our individual classroom practices and also the sort of wider network that we have. Not to mention the impact that this will have on our own professional development, hopefully. If we have more exposure to other teachers globally, when we're from other cultures, other types of schools and institutions, and we're talking about what we're doing in the classroom, what's working for us, perhaps how we've adapted various materials from Pearson, for example, this should have a really positive impact on all of us. So I hope that this is something that you agree with. It's great to see so many of you that are new to us at the moment. In terms of signing up, it's really just an expression of interest at the moment. So don't feel that if you give us, your name and your email address and express your interest, you're suddenly going to have loads of newsletters and emails from us. At the moment, you're simply just expressing your interest. And from my point of view, the more teachers that I have that are sort of saying that they would like to sign up, that they would like to be part of this PTE Academic teacher community so that we can learn from each other and support each other, the better for me. So I believe Rochelle is going to put out the sign up with our follow-up email. I don't know if she's putting it out in the chat right now. I think is it coming at the end, Rochelle?
I have dropped it into the chat just now, and then you'll get it at the end of the session as well. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, brilliant. So ultimately, in terms of what the future holds for us, my vision is that regardless of what sort of teacher training events we can put together in the future, whether these are virtual, whether they end up being face-to-face or a bit more of a blend, I hope that we will have established a tight-knit community where, when it comes to PTE Academic preparation and what we're doing in the classroom, that our community is the first place that we think of, the first place that we want to come for guidance and communication. So it's something that I'm really passionate about. It's something that I'm really excited to develop for us early next year. So I'm sort of using the next few months in the run up to Christmas to start talking about this and try to gauge the appetite. So hopefully that was a good place to kick off the session. Moving on now. Okay, so let's move into the heart of the session then. We're going to be talking to you about the teacher preparation pathway, which should save you a lot of time and aid your preparation in the classroom. Sorry, I'm just going to get rid of a window that seems to have come up here. There we go. So, because I'm aware that a lot of you are new to PTE Academic, I'm guessing you probably haven't interacted with this document yet. And for those of you that have already, it's an opportunity for us to go through this in a little bit more detail and show you how this works. So the idea is that you'll see from the image on the right-hand side here, this is actually exactly what the document looks like. We're asking you to consider, sort of do a bit of a self-assessment around, as a teacher, what you currently understand about the test. And we've split your knowledge into 3 areas. So familiarize, which is for many of you guys, over half of you in the call, you would go to familiarize because you are new to the test and you want to understand more about high stakes tests and ultimately the basics. Once you've been through this journey with us, you can move on to learn. And they're both, these 3 sort of words are mapped out here as well. You can move on to learn, where you understand more about scoring and the skills that are tested. And then finally, the exciting part, when you have been through all these stages with us, you can move on to prepare, which is much more centered around what resources we have available to be exploited in the classroom. So there's a bit of a self-assessment tool here. You, as a teacher, need to sort of check in with yourself and figure out where you lie in terms of your understanding of the test and decide the designated route first. We give you a suggested progression route. As you can see, this is a curated PDF, so all the documents and resources, you just click on the link and it takes you there directly. So this should hopefully mean that you don't have to waste any time navigating the website and looking for what you need. It's all there in one place. So let's put a bit of focus on what this looks like. I've decided to focus on the familiarise route just because to take one, it makes sense to start at the beginning. And I think this will actually be quite useful for many of you on the call. So let's imagine perhaps you know that you're going to have some individual students that want to prepare for PTE Academic, or possibly sometime in the future, your institution, your language school is going to be doing prep courses for PTE Academic, and you know that you're going to be teaching. So what do you do first? We've established that you need to familiarise yourself with the test. So you're new to it, you need to know the basics, and you need to understand more about high stakes testing. Great. So you'll start your journey with us. And I've just sort of blown this up a little bit from the document so we can go through it together in more detail and it's easier to see. So the first thing you would do naturally is you would click on test format. It will take you directly to our pathway on the website. There's 20 different question types in this test that the learners will have to undertake. And I think it makes sense as teachers to put yourself in the driving seat and go through the process as your test takers will. It will put you in the best possible position to support them. So you can learn about each item type, see what they look like from the computer screen, what's going to be tested, and how you need to navigate the questions as a first stop. Once you've been through that, I'd recommend you have a look at our Introduction to PTE Academic online course. This is a completely free course. Again, you just click on it and it will send you directly to the page where the course begins. And it will take you through. This is a facilitator, Joe from E2 Language, who you may be aware of if you have seen any of our prep products. And he will take you through each item type, gives a lot of input and guided learning, plenty of advice for how to help your learners prepare for each test type, lots of strategies, and it ultimately lets you go through each item and practice having a go at doing those questions. So I think this is a really nice complement to a course. If you are following a course book, for example, you can actually integrate these questions into your lessons, have a go, get your learners to do them as well, and have a good discussion around what item types do they find more difficult? Why is that? Which ones might they need to have more practice of? What skills are weaker for them, etc. And also take a bit of time looking at the score guide. At this point, you don't need to go into enormous detail, but it will help both you and your students to learn more about how the different tasks are scored. Ultimately, even if you just click on the link, look at the document and have a look at the score report. Have a look at the score report, what your students will receive after taking the test, and it will explain to you the overall score that they get from 10 to 90 being the highest, and it will show you how it breaks down the enabling skills and the communicative skills of speaking, listening, reading, writing, and it will indicate weaknesses and strengths in these areas as well. And then finally, move on to our FAQ videos. Now, again, it's a direct link onto YouTube. It's a series of videos that goes through the most common questions and sometimes mixing up the media, and rather than reading, just going through a few videos leisurely at your own pace. It's probably the most useful thing for you to do at this stage so that you feel that you have got a reasonably good grasp of what the test is, the format, how it's tested, and the sort of main needs to know. And then at that point, hopefully you'll feel that you're ready to move on to the next section, which is learn. So like any good, effective, efficient, normal, let's say, learning journey, it's not necessarily linear. We have put through a suggested route that you can go through with us and sort of tick them off as you do them. But you might feel, depending on the time you have available or your urgency and what you want to learn about first, or preferences, you may well switch up that route a little bit, and perhaps you go straight to the score guide if you want to know about that first. Perhaps you go to the facts videos first. It's just entirely up to you to make that call. So considering the entire document at a glance, and again, Rochelle is going to be giving you a direct link to this document, either in the email at the end, or is it at the moment? I'm not sure, Rochelle.
I have dropped it into the chat, so I think a few people have noticed, but if you want to take a look at that after the session, that would be great, everyone.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd definitely, that's great that you have it there now. We'll also be sending it out at the end. But what you'll notice across from that whole document, you don't necessarily need to look at it right now, but we have these three learning pathways, as I've mentioned. Familiarise, we just spoke about. When you move on to the next stage of learn, this is where you're going to get into a bit more detail around scoring and, of course, the skills that are tested, because this is where you as a teacher, where your role is really going to come into play and where you'll be most effective. So there are 3 teacher webinars. I would recommend that you go and have a look at them. They're with our master trainer, Louise Fitzgerald, who's based in Sydney, Australia. She's worked with us in PTE Academic right from the start, so about over 10 years now. She's a wealth of knowledge, and particularly the 3rd webinar, actually, webinar 3, goes into a lot of detail around really preparing to get into the classroom, and the resources that are available to you as well. Test tips and strategies. I'm going to talk about this in a bit more detail, but again, this is an entirely free resource on our teacher page, and I'll show you where that is in a few slides' time. And this is something that a document that you can integrate into your lessons, whether you just have sort of remote one-on-one students or group classes. It will go through every single item type, and as I mentioned, there are 20 of these, and it will give suggested tips and strategies, easy takeaways for your learners, and it gives at most 2 or 3 tips per item type. You don't want to be flooding your learners with too much information, so rather than using this as an exhaustive document, I'd recommend you just sort of pepper your lessons with a few, perhaps just focus on 1 or 2 item types, for example, per lesson if you are doing a course. And then we'll also move into more detail around the scoring and the essay score guide. I'm going to talk about that document in a moment. I know that often as teachers, we sometimes have some difficulty in interpreting or predicting, let's say, what we think our learners are likely to get in the test, particularly if you have a very quick sort of route to the test being taken. It can be quite difficult to interpret this, so we will talk a little bit about the score guide and how that can help you. And then finally, prepare. Now, this is when you get to this stage, you really are getting ready to deliver your course. So hopefully you will feel quite excited about this. I'm going to speak about these in a bit more detail on the next slide as well, but we do have lesson plans. We have 24 lesson plans. Each one is about an hour each. You will probably notice by now that there are 20 lesson plans because there are 20 different item types for you to go through. We also have a course outline, which is really useful because it focuses on particular areas that you may want to draw out if you're looking at actually devising more of a syllabus, something a lot longer term, as opposed to just a lesson here or there. You may well be using some of our course books, Expert, for example, or the official guide. And we do mention these in the document, so you know what course books complement the test prep well. I've put a star on the official guide there because if you are familiar with it, it's had quite an extensive makeover, and we're going to be relaunching this in autumn, and I'm going to talk to you about a few of those exciting updates for teachers too. I think it's good to mention here as well that you might want to give yourself more of a full experience of taking the test. sort of mirroring the experience the test takers will have as far as possible. So you might want to consider doing a scored practice test yourself and see how you do on that, as well as going through some of our sample questions. Finally, we also have a collocation list. Now, this is a very extensive list. I think it mentions over 2,400 of the most frequent collocations found in academic English. And I'll speak to you a little bit about how you might want to use that to enhance your lessons in a moment. So, regardless of where you are in your journey with PTE Academic, I'm aware that some of you might be coming today and you might be considering how you want to upskill and learn more about high stakes tests, particularly PTE Academic, because it might be an extra string to your bow if you're going to be doing more teaching remotely from home at the moment. Or perhaps you have previously taught a few prep courses for this test, or maybe you have a lot of experience, but hopefully if we can keep these sort of guidance points in mind, I think regardless of where you are, this will be helpful, and it's certainly what I would be doing if I was getting ready to go into the classroom. So first steps, make sure that you feel confident, obviously, with the test format, how it works, the fact that it's on a computer, what the practicalities around that, and there's a wealth of information on our website and also linked out on our document. Go through the different item types, go through this process, do our online course or the pathway on the website, and familiarize yourself with what these item types are, ultimately what it is that the test taker needs to do, so you feel that you understand this fully. And the skills tested, I already mentioned that the skills tested is where you're really going to be driving this work in the classroom, repeating it, creating opportunities on a practical level to really develop these skills in your learners where they might be weak. And this can all be done by following firstly our familiarise and our learn pathways on the document, which Rochelle has already put into the chat. Regardless of the course book you might be using, you might be following a course book, one of our suggested ones, you might be using one of the ELT course books on our website, or perhaps even nothing at all. Maybe it's just practice tests. Maybe it's just practice tests and some of the information we have on the website. Maybe your students already have a lot of their own preparatory work and you're just enhancing it. But regardless, remember, it's completely free for you to access. I would really recommend you integrate our test tips and strategies. We'll link out to that. You can go and download it and have a look. Make sure that you're just introducing a few item types per lesson. Don't give them the exhaustive list, because you really want to try, and if you have a prep course, obviously this will depend on how long you have with your learner before they have to take the test. It could be as little as 2 weeks, it could be 2 months. Who knows, it could even be a full year in some cases. But make sure that you're, you know, giving sort of more digestible chunks of new information, and that you give your learners some key pointers and tips to take away, which is why I mentioned the test tips and strategies, because for each item type, it will only give 2 or 3 strategies. And this is something that they can start to put onto, you know, flashcards, and so they will remember when they have to do a read aloud item, for example, to focus on not pausing for more than 3 seconds, or to think about their intonation, their rising and falling when they're speaking into the microphone, that they'll think about when to take an appropriate pause. But that would be enough. The lesson plans as well. Now, the lesson plans are really key because they are an extension of the test tips and strategies. So for each item type, they will give you an example of a 60-minute session. So this will really extend the ideas we've given in the test tips and strategies document, and will provide a much more focused preparation and create more opportunities for peer learning. Now, whether you just have 2 people or whether you have a group of 20 or beyond, the real effect of these lessons is when there's the opportunity for these skills to be practiced. And they can sort of test each other. You can discuss these, be more collaborative, be more communicative. And so this is why the lesson plans are so good, because it will give you plenty of ideas of how to really build out these strategies and give them some very consolidated practice. Make sure as well that you familiarise yourself with the essay score guide. Do become familiar with the rating scale and start to notice these traits in your learners' responses, whether it's their speaking responses or in their written work. So just to give you one example, in writing, we know that your learners will be tested on their grammatical accuracy. So on the essay scored guide, if you have a look at the rating scale, it goes from 0, 1, and then up to 2. 2 would be showing that they have a good, rather consistent level of grammatical accuracy. 0 being a very inconsistent level of grammatical accuracy. If you familiarise yourself with the traits that they're tested on and the rating scale, you can start to practice noticing these in your learners' work as a first point of call. I already mentioned the collocation list, and again, you can download this for free. It's a great resource, but it's very, very, very lengthy. And so you obviously don't just want to provide 2,400 or above new items or new lexical terms. So consider how this can enhance your lessons. Where might you be able to pepper a few of these new lexical terms? You know, can it be under an umbrella term, for example? And you can sort of have a more visual representation of different collocations, or you know, you can put them into sort of different groupings. Or do you want to consider the topics that you had readings or listening material on this evening, and can you go and select a few collocations that might lend themselves well to these lessons? Ultimately, as you know, students are going to value learning more vocabulary because it's something that it's measurable, that they feel like they're learning something. Sometimes in test preparation classes, we do have to remind them of everything that they're learning. And then finally, let's not forget the offline practice test. You can download this as well. It's a fantastic resource. The reason why I particularly like it is because regardless of whether you're teaching face-to-face, a virtual tool, groups or individuals, you can use this. Okay, I'm going to move on a bit quicker now. Here's the teaching resources page. You just simply have to go onto our URL at the bottom, go to organizations, and click on teachers and teaching resources, and everything is there. And of course, you can stay connected with us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. A few top tips here. Please remember, study skills are not acquired instinctively. They're not acquired instinctively, which means that we really, really need to make the efforts to remind them of what they should be doing to best serve themselves and get the most out of their practice time. This is why I was so keen on using the lesson plans. I'm so keen on using the test tips and strategies, because they need to be reminded of this. Don't forget time management as well. And I'm not just talking about how long it takes, how long they need to allow to be able to do each item throughout the test, but also how much time do they have to get up to speed. Do they have, you know, several months where they can also learn more about general English acquisition, or do they really just have to focus on the item types, almost like a driving test, and practicing these skills over and over because they have a short time frame? Ultimately, learners need to acquire good attributes to prepare for test success. We know this, but consider using communicative techniques to introduce academic content in a test like this. This will help your learners to acquire these traits. Now, this is probably content for a whole new webinar, but I'm sure you're familiar with the 4 C's of 21st century skills. So consider how we can get our learners to critically analyze the text that they see, how they can be creative with you know, coming up with new questions to test possibly some of their peers. How can we collaborate in the classroom? How can we use the question types to communicate with our group and get them to discuss what they find easy, what they find difficult? So it's really a blend of bringing the ELT classroom, the communicative classroom, and how that works and complements with academic test prep. So what else is new for teachers? Well, I have to say rather a lot. I'm going to go through this part quite quickly because you might know my colleague Jo Sale, who is more the expert on this area. But if you are familiar with the official guide, we've given this a bit of a makeover, and we're really excited to say that it's coming in the autumn. So ultimately, it's going to be a shorter but more engaging and user-friendly product. The real key piece of information here is that we have print packages, but also 100% digital packages available too, depending on what your setup is and what you're most comfortable using. It's great value for both test takers and teachers. It will provide, as always, the familiarisation with the test, the deep dive into item types, and all those practical strategies and guidance that some of you may already know. This edition is designed to be used by teachers and test takers. So ultimately, it is a course book that's designed for the classroom or for self-study. Now, it works very well for fast track guidance if you have a test taker who needs to prepare really quickly. It can also be used at a much slower rate, so much more in-depth guidance for those test takers who want to prepare over time. I do want to focus on this course book because there's a lot of teacher-specific resources that are new and rather unique. So what do these look like? As I mentioned, there is a test taker version of the official guide as well as a teacher version of the official guide. Now, if you're using the teacher version and you look to the right-hand side of the screen here, you get a lot of resources on our Pearson English platform, namely fact documents for teachers about the test, lots of teacher notes and supplementary activity ideas that you can use in your lessons, quizzes, a 4-skill mastery overview. We've got worksheets, teacher-focused scoring guidelines, as I mentioned. We want to make sure that we are getting better and stronger at interpreting our students' scores and how likely they are in getting the score they need to get, as well as progress and readiness checklists. Again, all tools that will help us to interpret how close our learners are to getting the score that they need. Support videos. Now, this is the brand new development for the official guide and a great resource for teachers and test takers alike. And you can, you know, in the classroom, you can go through these together. So it focused on the test task types, one video for every task type. By now, you all know there are 20. So these are short videos and that they pull together some of the key information from the book. And there's plenty of guidance, as you'd expect, around being engaging and manageable chunks of information. As I've mentioned, you don't want to flood or overload your students with too much information. You want to make sure that it's in manageable, digestible chunks. So drip feeding. As I said, it's a great opportunity for test takers and teachers to see the tasks actually come to light on the screen, and it's designed to be used in the classroom, or you can simply just revert your test takers to these to do on their own. And what is key here is that these videos do focus on the most common mistakes. So it's a really good idea to have some focus on this with your learners. The last point I want to make, another feature of the official guide that's coming is the online practice bank. So ultimately, we have 300 different questions that your learners can go through to practice the task types, to give them more practice on the computer. These are unscored, but it still gives them the opportunity to go through the questions and have a look at sample responses as well, so they can see what we gauge as a good, strong sample answer. What I think is great here, you'll see at the bottom, is that it includes a teacher dashboard in the teacher version of the book. So it will allow you to assign tasks to a class, and then you can start to see student progress across the group. Now, as we start to round up the session, I want to talk a bit about what else you can do to improve your teaching practice. Now, I'm very aware that whatever your backgrounds are today, you're not, even if you are teaching PTE Academic, you won't just be solely a PTE Academic teacher. You won't only be working in high stakes assessment. I imagine you'll probably be doing lots of other things as well. So what can we do to sort of improve our teaching practice? So skills that are directly applicable to the test, but also out with this. This is something that I always used to reflect upon a lot myself as a teacher. And I think for me, trying to have a broader, more eclectic, or or let's say exposing myself to a broader range of materials, for me, I found it worked really, really well. And I wanted to be sort of braver in trying out new activities in the classroom. You might find something that works really well with one group doesn't work so well with another. And while there are lots of different reasons for this, when you've been teaching for a while, you can start to get a bit comfortable, maybe a bit complacent. And even if what you're doing is working, you want to feel motivated and excited. You don't want to feel bored by what you're doing. So as well as going to look at other teachers and see what they're doing in the classroom, consider what else you can do to broaden your teaching practices and broaden your mind. For example, the Teacher Education and Leadership Academy at Pearson, you'll see their contact details at the top there, telepd@pearson.com. They have a range of online micro units which are designed for classroom strategy training. So these are online professional development units that you can follow. As an example, Classroom Foundations, if we look at one example there, can you see effective feedback, for example? This unit, which would probably take about an hour of your time, is one example of content that I think lends itself really, really well to test preparation classes, because we do accept that there will be some kind of remediation sometimes in test prep classes. Our learners might not get the scores that they want. And what can we do as teachers to balance that effective feedback? You know, learning about being kind, specific and helpful, and understanding that effective feedback is not just the learner on their own, but it's the teacher and their learner working together to sort of put together that action plan. I would recommend, if you're interested in doing some of these short micro units online, taken at a pace that suits you, that you contact the TelePD team. I think there's a lot of content there that will really enhance your teaching practice. So, you know, be proactive in having a look and sort of considering what might be an interesting avenue of further study for you. As well as that, there's also the Pearson English podcast. You might be aware of this if you go on the Pearson English page. The Pearson English panel, they chat to English language experts from all around the world, and we share experiences, have great innovative discussions and explore trends. Just to mention, the last few I checked out was native speakerism and mediation. Okay, I think that if you're engaged and you're staying up to date with trends, you can bring a real context and richness to your lessons. So it's very worthwhile, and you know, you can do it while you're driving the kids to school, while you're doing the housework. So consider really exposing yourself to new content and material. But there's more, and here's the last exciting point that I wanted to make. We do have specific PTE Academic teacher training coming early next year. We haven't spoken about this yet, so I wanted to take the opportunity to mention it today. What we're building at this very moment is an online module series for you, okay? They don't even have the full titles yet on the left because we haven't got to that stage yet. But ultimately, it's going to be 6 individual modules that go through all the individual sections of the test, as you can see there. All you need is a computer to access these, and you can take them at a pace that suits you. You might want to approach this if you really need the sort of full training, and I would encourage you to do so. Approach this as a full package and go through all the modules, or you might just want to fill gaps in your knowledge and perhaps look at the writing paper or go through the practical scoring experience, for example. There'll also be a complete set of practical classroom activities which will provide a range of effective skills-based tasks which are really easy to execute, and you don't need a course book or anything. It's simply just the strategies that we give you. So even if you're not teaching PTE Academic, these classroom activities will be useful out of that test setting. Plenty of checkpoint activities to check your learning, and of course reflection activities so you can incorporate your new knowledge into the classroom and use this to interact with other teachers. There will be plenty of downloadable resources to enhance your practice, as well as recognising your learning via online badging or for the full series, or certificates for individual modules. So we are really, really excited to bring that to you very early next year. We'd love to hear your thoughts about it as we start moving through the development, but yes, early next year for that. Some final thoughts as we start to wrap up then, and then we'll be opening up the floor for a few Q&As. Consider staying connected. I've already mentioned at the moment how you can stay connected with us on Facebook, on Twitter, and our various different areas of social media. But at the moment, as we're navigating a bit of a change in education, our teaching practices and the mode by which we connect with our students is changing. Being connected is really, really important when we don't have those same avenues of face-to-face interaction. I hope that you will feel empowered, genuinely empowered and excited by your role and the opportunity that teaching high stakes assessment represents for us. It's a really exciting, fast changing environment that there's a lot of demand now for tests for students that are wanting to go to UK or US or Australian universities, or for immigration reasons. And so it's an exciting area to be part of if you're an educator. Do be proactive in your reminding your students of everything that they are learning in this process. PTE Academic is a huge learning curve. The amount of new content that you are exposed to just in training to take this test is enormous. And hopefully you will also find this to be true for you. I hope it goes without saying that you'll enjoy the experience and that you'll have fun. I think that, you know, we obviously will consider how effective our teaching practices are on, you know, how well our students are doing and if they are getting the scores that they need. But let's also remember to enjoy the experience and have fun. Another really important point is reflection. So please do consider how to apply today's knowledge and also every day to your classroom with your learners. Like everything in life, no two learners are the same. So what we've spoken about today, while I'm sure it's applicable, you do need to reflect and you might need to make some amendments, you might need to make some tweaks so that this content is applicable to your learners in your classroom. And go easy on yourself as well in these reflections. Go easy on yourself, don't be too hard on yourself, and enjoy the process. Now, lastly, if you want to find out a bit more about PTE Academic and some of the very common myths that exist, and there's quite a few of them, I think high stakes assessment lends itself well to this topic, please go check out our session on YouTube. It's actually with me, so I hope you're not too tired of me yet, but also with my colleague Daria, who's based in Melbourne, Australia. And we put together a really fun virtual session where we take you through all the most common myths of PTE Academic and we bust them for you. So it should be a fun, light-hearted but informative session. So please do go and check that out. I think Michelle is going to give you the link in a moment. And finally, before we get to a quick Q&A, I would love to know, and you can just pop this in the chat box, what would you like to see from us next? If you're someone that's new to PTE Academic, if you've been working with us for a while, if you're anywhere in the middle, put a few ideas in the chat box now before we move to the Q&A. What can we do to support you? Do you have any comments around the teacher training or the teacher community I've spoken about? A couple ideas would be fantastic before we move on. So I'm going to give you just 2 minutes or so because I know that we need to wrap up quite soon.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Mel. And everyone, you'll see we've dropped in the YouTube link there, but please go ahead and add in what you'd like to see from us in the chat box. We'll pick that up at the end of the session. And also, if you have any other questions that have occurred to you throughout, please go ahead and ask that as well.
Great, thanks, Rochelle. Yes, we're always keen to hear about sessions, particularly around everything we've mentioned around the test preparation and all the support that's coming. I do want to mention something else as well. On the 8th of September, this is our final webinar in the assessment summer sessions. It's called A Look to the Future, AI's Place in Education and a Language Assessment. Now, it's with David Booth. You might be familiar with David. He's our Director of Test Development. He's certain the person who's most in the know when it comes to artificial intelligence and scoring and how this is moving us forward in language assessment. So I'm going to be there. I think as a teaching group, I hope that, you know, let's all take this seriously. Let's be informed about this and start to understand the opportunity it holds for us as educators. So, you know, let's all dial in. Perhaps we can pick up this conversation together. Perhaps this can be our next session. Let's discuss this in a bit more detail, what it means for us as teachers and how this might change our teaching practices somewhat, and ultimately what the opportunity is. Remember, I said at the start of the session that I wanted us to go away feeling empowered and enthused and excited to get in the classroom. So,
Mel, we've had a lot of people drop in some suggestions. I'm going to kick off with a question here, something I've noticed a few people have asked about. Okay, so we've had a lot of online training, which is fantastic, but in the future, do you think we'll be able to have face-to-face events?
Yeah, so I'm really glad you brought this up. For us, I think face-to-face training, getting to meet you, getting to see what your teaching practices are, how well our resources work for you, and what we might need to do to evolve these is a really key part of the work and the development that we do at Pearson. So obviously at the moment, having a fully virtual training solution is critical for us because it's all we can do. But certainly and this is all dependent on demand as well, which is why community is so important. What else might we need to do beyond a fully virtual teacher training model? Is it more blended sessions, making them more interactive? Do we want to have some deeper dive workshop sessions where we work together to create our own lesson plans face to face? I would like to think that we can put these together. But at the moment, this is obviously quite unknown while we don't know what the situation will be with the ease of lockdown, etc. But certainly, this is the first step, the online teacher training. It's something that should serve everyone, every teacher, whether you're experienced or brand new, and then we will use that in collaboration with you and your feedback to evolve the teacher training model. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So definitely something for us to look forward to in the future, I would say. Let's see, so we've got another question here. So we sometimes have students who require a high score, but they have a low level of English proficiency. How do you think a teacher can manage that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think being realistic is something that as teachers we are always going to have to be mindful of, and that we'll always have to navigate. It won't necessarily go away. So we will have students that come in and maybe they tell us, hey, I've got 2 weeks, I have to take this test, I want to go to this university, or I'm moving to XYZ location. And you might even notice that their English proficiency is not particularly high, and within 2 weeks it almost feels a bit like mission impossible to get them to the score that they need in such a short period of time. But when you do get new students, let's make sure that they're really mindful of what score they need to get and what their level of English proficiency is right now and what those gaps are, and that should help us be able to suggest a more realistic route for them in terms of time frames. But ultimately, I think we all realise that if you do need to, if you're not just talking about test preparation, but if you do need to improve your English proficiency, if it's at a quite low level, the best thing that we can do is give ourselves as many opportunities as possible to be engaged in, to be hearing, to exposing ourselves to real spoken English in sort of real circumstances. But if you're not living in a UK, if you're not living in an English-speaking country, which is often the case for many of our learners, make sure that they are listening to as much content as possible, that they are reading, that they are listening to movies, that they are, checking out the newspaper online, that they are just exposing themselves to as much spoken English as is humanly possible in preparation for that test. But as long as you're being realistic and managing expectations, that's all we can do.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to pose one last question to you, Mel, and this is something I think you'll have a lot of insight on. I know you've given me a lot of insight on this as a result of what's been happening around the world with coronavirus. But we've had a question around balancing your life as a parent, as a partner, as a teacher. I'm just wondering, what type of tips do you have for the teacher community, and any other insights that you'd want to share as we wind down here?
Yeah, well, something I think ultimately at the moment it's quite a big question, isn't it? We could talk about this for a long time, but I've actually found that particularly if you do have a partner and children and, you know, various other, regardless of, I think, your personal circumstances, you're always going to have a life out with that classroom, right? Whatever, however that may look for you. And I think it's important to be pretty proactive in giving your time to your classroom preparation, you know, getting those lessons prepared, understanding your learners and what they need, and really making sure that you're up to speed with the test and how to develop these skills. But you also look after yourself, and I think we need to be really proactive in making sure that we're giving enough due attention to outside of our work, outside of our professional life as well. Because I actually find if I keep this balanced, I tend to be much better in terms of my time management. And as a result, because I know that I can't devote 100% of my time to my work, I'm far more likely to really use that time proactively and be fully engaged when I am doing work in the classroom, or if I am doing work on my computer with Pearson. I think being mindful of having that healthy balance is the best thing you could possibly do. And let's not forget as well that as teachers, you know, we're also bringing real life into the classroom as well. And in terms of our learners, we're also, when we talk about 21st century skills, we're not just teaching them to pass a test per se. We're also teaching them to interact and collaborate and communicate meaningfully in the real life world. So if you can bring your own personal experiences to that, it will make you a much more well-rounded teacher, and your lessons will be really enhanced as a result of that, I think. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it does, and it ends on a very uplifting note. So thank you so much, Mel. I see we're just at the top of the hour here. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us and for the fantastic engagement. I saw there were a lot of comments happening with some suggestions for future topics. So we'll look forward to taking a look at those. And I do want to let everyone know that we'll be sharing the recording, and you'll also receive your certificate after the email goes out here in the next couple hours. So watch for that. I think Mel also had mentioned the next summer session, which is the a look at the future AI's place in education and language assessment with David Booth. So make sure you've signed up for that one if you haven't already. And I think we'll go ahead and close the session there. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Mel, so much for that great insight.
Thank you so much for coming in. I hope that you'll all be proactive in joining our community so I can communicate with you all soon. Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.